What's up, studs and studettes? This is a very special episode. So I was trying to find a way to tell more of my story. Like, I give my opinion a lot, and I talk about business and life lessons that I'm dealing with and learning through and going over. But I wanted to talk more about my story, and I was actually challenged by my coach from last year to tell more of my story. And so I decided to do a special interview episode where I have somebody else interviewing me. So Cody Jefferson was my coach for a period of time and will likely be my coach again at some point in the future. We've been talking recently about getting him re-engaged because I am going through another season of evolution that I could benefit from some help with. And so I called him, was like, hey man, I'm looking to do this thing where I get interviewed for my own podcast, to have somebody challenge me, ask me harder questions, dig deeper, who really knew me. Like, we worked together for about a little over a year. And so he knew more about my journey and what I'm doing and who I am than most people. And so what you're going to listen to or watch, if you're watching on YouTube, is a 2-part episode of Mike Claudio being interviewed by Cody Jefferson. So this is part 1. Check it out. Let me know what you think. What's up, studs and studettes? Welcome to our big stud podcast interview. This one's going to be different. So over the years, I've had a lot of people tell me that, like, there's more to my story than I talk about a lot, specifically in content. You know, I'm not great about talking about myself. I'm not great about getting on camera and just spewing the Mike Claudio story, but I do a decent job of it from stage and in Q&A when people bring it up. And I've been looking for ways to kind of get more of my story out there. And I thought about this idea of being interviewed on my own podcast by somebody that I respect and look up to and could carry the conversation, ask hard questions, carry the authority and delivery. And I sought out different people. And the person that I brought in to do this is somebody that really knows my story more than anything, and has a lot of, like, I coached with him. Like, he was my coach for a very big portion of 2022 and 2023. And there's so much that people look at now in the Mike Claudio brand, the WinRate brand, the accomplishments, the authority, the following, the content. They're like, man, it must be so easy for him. And kind of that must be nice mentality. And there's so much that I haven't talked about, from being overweight, failing out of college, struggling with scarcity, struggling in my relationship with my wife, with Tiff, and, having kids and starting businesses and bad partnerships and lawsuits. And I have struggled with everything most people have struggled with, but they believe that I haven't. And I want to put that more of the story out there. And so I also didn't want to just do like, oh, let's interview Mike for no reason. So I had to put some reason behind it. And like, we've accomplished as a brand some really cool milestones. Like, we've released over 500 podcast episodes. We've released over 600 YouTube videos. I've made it to the 6-year mark in business, which, like, all of those things independently are cool accomplishments. But I thought this would be a great, ideally this is going to turn into a multi-episode type interview, because I don't know where this is going. I've never done this before. I haven't seen a lot of people do this before. Yeah. But I reached out to Cody Jefferson, who's one of the strongest coaches that I've worked with, from a humanizing business, humanizing coaching, building an actual brand, not just being a coach, and blending it in with faith and being a father and being a husband now. And he helped me a lot in the evolution, but he also hurt a lot of the stories, a lot of the fears, a lot of the anxieties that, I don't talk about publicly for different reasons. Some, it's like none of your fucking business. And others, it's like, there's that brand awareness that I want to be the authority. I want to be looked up to. I want to be somebody people can trust. And I'm more vulnerable and open than many, but obviously Cody, behind the scenes being my coach, got more of those, like, Tuesday afternoon, like, hey man, I'm breaking, let's talk. And I haven't had a lot of men in my life that I can do that with. And I've been through a lot, and my goal of this, my desired outcome of this episode, is that Cody's able to peel back the layers a little bit, ask some hard questions, and we get into more of the story behind what built the base camp that we're at. Like, if you've coached with me at all, if you've dealt with me, like, you hear me talk about base camps. Like, you don't go from the bottom to the top of the mountain. You accomplish the base camp. You sit there for a minute to acclimate before you plan the next one. And I feel like we're at that. Like, we hit the $3 million mark in revenue in 2023. We're in a really great leadership team right now. Like, my relationship with my wife is great. My relationship with my kids is great. My fitness is kind of good. My financials are pretty good. Like, I'm at a good base camp now where I think, like, talking about what it took to get here will be good for more people to hear. Because if you're new to the audience here, you're just like, oh, Mike just talks easy. Mike just has great, he's on stage, he's got a lot of content, but like my first couple of YouTube videos are no longer on YouTube. Like they were terrible. My first couple of podcasts are still out there, but it's amazing that, you know, the evergreen of that type of content, people still listen to it. But there's lots of my story that maybe you haven't heard. And the goal of the desired outcome of today's episode is to show you a little bit more of the human, vulnerable side that I haven't shared that much.
Yeah.
So, Cody, man, I really appreciate you making the time for this.
Dude, it's going to be good. Tell me this. What's the greatest lesson life is teaching you right now?
The blissful dissatisfaction is some of the hardest lessons in patience I'm ever going to deal with. And what I mean by that is like, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. You know, like I've accomplished a lot, overcame a lot. You know, we got the house with the pool in, like you were kind of a part of that journey.
Yeah.
You know, so I have a lot of what I wanted. And one of the biggest lessons now is being patient to sit in it and accept it and be blissful in it, not be done, but that constant like online persona of like everybody that's trying to sell you something's yelling at you about how you're not good enough in something. There's a lot of that out there, right? I mean, you and I have talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
In the like being an alternative perspective and not selling things based on making people feel shitty about themselves, you know? And like, I'm okay being okay right now, but it's like, even Tiff and I last year at the end of 2023 talked about how like we're struggling dreaming bigger right now. And like, we know that like, if you don't dream bigger a little bit, you're not chasing something, like you get complacent, you get a little stationary, you get a little stagnant, and then you can lose it.
Yeah.
And I lived most of my life hustling one thing to the next. And the problems of, you know, late 23 and early 24, like I can't outwork them. I have to be patient. And that's a lesson I'm learning right now. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job with it overall. But being blissful and dissatisfied, you know, it's a term that I heard Ed Milet say once, blissful dissatisfaction. And I'm like, I want that.
Yeah.
And I believe I've accomplished that.
I call it contentment without complacency.
Okay.
So then what motivates you now?
Well, it's like looking at different scoreboards. You know, for the longest time, it was the business, and it was revenue, and it was clients, and it was, oh my God, how many YouTube videos how many YouTube views and it was like, that was the scoreboard of, and now it's like, I rewrote actually a list recently that was like, what does winning look like to me now? And it's time to get lost in things. It's the energy to be interested in what my kids are interested in. And so like what motivates me now is being able to maintain that lifestyle.
Yeah.
While also forcing time. Because like I have the least amount of clients personally I've coached maybe ever right now with intention.
Interesting.
I have the most time with my team that I've ever had before. I have more time with my kids than I've ever had before. And so part of it is like just accepting the fact that like I am winning and I am motivated to keep that.
Yeah.
And so what's motivating right now is, you know, seeing, so like part of my champion's legacy statement is about my kids wanting to like grow up and be like me. I think most dads feel that, right?
Sure.
Well, MJ had a science fair project a couple weeks ago, and like the video, he just crushes this. Like, and it didn't even.
Oh, I saw it.
It didn't even go to plan. It didn't go to plan, and he still like he crushed it. And even like his
was it balloons or something?
Yeah, it was static electricity.
I remember
so and like he apparently clean hair doesn't create as much static electricity as dirty hair does.
I got so
and we made
much
him
static electricity then.
We made him wash himself that morning because he was like going to present. So the static didn't work. We didn't know that in the moment, but the static electricity didn't work. And he handled it like perfectly. He made a joke about it.
Yeah.
He's like 8.
Yeah.
And he handled stage presence in front of 20 of his peers better than most adults I know.
So Stetson's 9.
Yeah.
How interesting is it now doing what we do, having the freedom, but also it does come with its own complications and stress, and it comes with its own complexities because you're managing things. So we have that side of things, but then we have the family side of things, which is a very interesting dynamic. And our boys sound very similar in the sense that they're reaching that age where they're actually like a good hang now. What's your favorite part about being a dad at this age?
Well, I think it's important to share that like I hated being a dad for like the first 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
I didn't like it at all.
Why?
I struggled severely with that heavy dependence ages. I wish I had a direct answer to that question of why. Because I fought it. I struggled severely with like guilt and shame about it.
Sure.
not that I was a disengaged
Yeah.
father, but like I got zero joy from it.
Interesting.
And then till like 5 or 6 years old, and now like both my kids, like Everett's 5, MJ's 8, and like now I love it.
Yeah.
But like early on, I hated it. I don't like needy people, and like nothing's more needy than a 3-year-old. Like, and like
That's fair.
I mean, it sounds terrible to say, but that's the truth. Is like I didn't like not being able to control the situation. I didn't like not being able to help when the baby's crying. And like I you know, Tiff breastfed, and like she had that great relationship. I'm just like standing here like cleaning up the shit afterwards, and like I did not enjoy that season.
You know, it's interesting.
And so now, but to answer your question, like what I enjoy about it now is I enjoy sitting with my sons to develop a plan to improve.
Okay.
And so like, you want to be better at baseball? Cool. This is what that looks like.
Yeah.
Like, you want to be better at jiu-jitsu? Cool. This is what let's do it together. And then watching MJ go from like season to season in baseball and get better at hitting. And now he's like this is only his second year in baseball. He's 8. And like, I kept him out of organized sports almost intentionally because I got burnt out on it as a kid. But like, there's a certain performance anxiety that comes with like travel sports that like I don't want them to get because I dealt with it. Probably still do.
We're in competitive baseball.
Yeah, like it's and like watching the way parents operate and kids operate in that travel sports environment. I'm like, I don't want any influence of this on my family. It's all negative. And so like last year, his first year, he got 0 hits all season. This year, like he's the number 4 hitter, like doing a great job. And so like watching them improve and see it and feel it and be like, look, Dad, we got better at this. Like, that's been fun for me. Could be homeschool too. So it's like, we're trying to get better at math. We're trying to get better at writing. We're trying to get better at science fair projects. Like him and I practice his science fair presentation together. Yeah. Like that was fun for me. Cause like, I know I can make him better here. Like this is something I know. And it was cool to watch him go in and then like the science, like the experiment not go to plan. Sure. And he still handled himself and made a joke about it and didn't get embarrassed and just like crushed it. That's fun.
How is it? Because you and Tiff both run WinRate.
Yep.
Homeschool.
Yep.
Company is ran from home.
Correct.
How's that? I mean, because I run mine from home. Yeah. We run everything from my office, but my kids are in public school, so you've got that window of like 8 to 4. How is that?
It's been a constant evolution over the last 2 years.
Who handles what?
So we each play a role. Okay. We each understand our role. So there's me and Tiff, and then we also have a nanny that helps as well. Okay. So like we do have a third party support system throughout the week, and so like we come up with lesson plans. We come up with a game plan for sports and like jiu-jitsu and homework and play dates and.
Do you guys follow a curriculum?
Like I think it's called The Good and the Beautiful. Okay. So South Carolina has some really great like laws and rules around this, and they're in a co-op. So
can't just raise feral kids.
Yeah, no. But like but overall, like South Carolina does have some pretty free. Like there's a pretty easy way to make it your own. Okay. At least in South Carolina, I don't know how other states compare because South Carolina is all I looked at, but. And so we follow curriculum, we follow a game plan, we have lesson plans, we have a game plan for the month, like who's taking who where for what activity to make sure they're staying active and engaged. And apparently upstate South Carolina is like one of the biggest homeschool ecosystems in the country. Huh. And so like every like provider has homeschool stuff. Like jiu-jitsu has homeschool classes. So like all the kids that are there at 11 a.m. on a Thursday are all homeschool kids. So like they're around more people that are living that lifestyle. They're around more people that are doing that. Like they have a climbing camp at the local climbing place that's for homeschool kids only. Yeah. That's at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursdays.
Well, because back in the day, homeschool was like, you're a little Magoo.
Yeah, well, I think it's because of just lack of access to information.
Well, and just lack of access to other kids in general.
Totally.
Like you're just
the internet
in a bubble.
Changed everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, like you can literally use YouTube to homeschool as long as it's like you're tracking it and there's homework and like there's rules around it, but like you can make it your own.
Interesting.
But like it's definitely it's much easier to fall into a monotonous routine because there's times I'll go 2 weeks and not leave my house, and like that's hard. Yeah. Because I'd love to work from home. No, you wouldn't want to only be able to be at home.
Sure.
But we built it that way. Like the gym is at the house, like the kids are at the house, my wife's at the house, the business at the house.
What about their practices though?
So like, but there's times I'm not responsible for it. Like, hey, this 2 week
that's
period,
fair.
I'm not available for this because I have this, an event or whatever. And like, I just don't leave because like, that's just what that week or 2 weeks looks like.
Interesting.
And so Tiff is doing this, or Andrea, is our nanny. She's taking them here or there. And like, I mean, but I also get to have dinner with my kids almost every night and breakfast with them. And like I'll say one of the best things about it though, like one of the worst things as a kid was like having to get woken up for school, right? It's like, we gotta go get dressed. And it's like this mad rush scramble of anxiety in the morning. Everett slept till 9:30 this morning. And like, that's cool. And like when they need sleep, they get it. Like when they don't, like MJ's my early bird. He's up by like 5:30 every day.
Okay.
Everett will sleep like crazy.
Yeah.
And but like, there's no pressure in the morning. Whatever time they wake up, we get to spend time together, and it's fun, and it's not pressure, and it's not this like need to get out of the house by a certain time because of traffic and like, drop off lines, and like that's the pros are that.
Yeah.
Like there's
Do you
really
also
no
feel like
pressure.
that could be a con though? Like because it also creates a very unrealistic expectation of what life for most people actually looks like? Or are you trying to set a different standard for your kids in general?
I don't like. That's what your life looks like for the most part. You come and go as you please. My life's kind of that way. Like,
well, yes, but the kids are on a very regimented schedule, partially because of school.
Yeah, but we still have school. Like they still have class start times.
Sure.
They still have like times they have to get to practice. Like so, there is still some regiment to it. It's just on our terms.
That's fair.
And so like, because kids still do operate best in routine.
You 100%.
Hands down.
That's why I'm asking.
No, and so there is like they know when class times are. Like they know when
When's
school
class
times
start?
are. So it depends on the day,
10?
different days. But like, because we do 3 days of like studies a week, and then we do 2 days of more like go out and do something, go to the park.
Yeah, more interactive.
Yeah, more
learning.
interactive.
Yeah.
And so like this morning, like class starts at 10. So like MJ can get up. They like we have a PlayStation, but it doesn't get turned on. Like I have it like locked down. They have to ask for time to use it. And so like MJ got up yesterday like 6 o'clock and like spent an hour looking through his yearbook. Like just reading. Like MJ loves reading.
He has a year, but is it just him?
Well, it's so they're co-op. So in South Carolina, you have to be a part of a co-op, and so the co-op meets once or twice a week depending on the season. And so it's just that. It's just like the kids.
It's a flip book of
me.
him.
It's me.
It's just, oh man, I remember when
That's a fair point.
Star athlete right here, top of the class.
Yeah.
Troublemaker.
We're photoshopping in other people. No, like so like, but I'd say 10 o'clock is most days. They have to be at the co-op. Like on Tuesdays they go to this. It's called the Valley Forest School. Okay. And we have to be there at 9, and it's like 9 to 2, and it's always outside. Raining, snow, doesn't matter. You are outside from 9 to 2 learning how to be in the wilderness. So start fires, whittle, tie knots, stuff like that. So like every Tuesday they do that for like 12 or 15 weeks, and then like move on to the next thing. So there's still that time regimented stuff. But for the most part, like we like the freedom to be able to get up when they want. Yeah. And not have that pressure in the morning. But the truth is, I don't know if I'm them up.
Isn't that a weird thing? Like, so I grew up.
I don't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah, I grew up, and we're kind of lower middle class. Never went without anything. We just didn't have a lot. Yeah. And now having an abundance, and our kids not wanting for anything, in the back of your mind, it's like, well, was it that adversity that created this in me? And how do we manufacture that adversity so that they don't become entitled and soft?
No, there is no answer to that.
I know, dude, it's all just one big science experiment.
But I'll take, like, life happened this way for millions of years. Like the school system's like less than 100 years old. Okay. Or about 100 years old, right? And so like you got to think for 2,000 years, right, at least, there was no school structure. Sure. And like they made a lot, integrated a lot, invented a lot, survived a lot, overcame a lot. Like I appreciate like, okay, yeah, in the 1900s, adversity was different, right? There's no technology, but now the adversity is like how to mitigate emotional control, right? How to mitigate access to too much information. Oh, sure. Yeah. Right. So I think that the adversity is different. Yeah. But
the fundamentals of learning how to be a human, well, I mean, they're evolving, but they're similar.
My mindset has been so far as this is I don't want to sit down and teach them anything they can Google.
It's great.
Right. And so like problem solving, emotional control, like my kids are some of the most emotionally intelligent humans I've ever met. Like MJ can pick apart a situation with no verbal communication. He can contextualize
Stetson's
and read
that way. Yeah.
and like read the room and understand and read body language and facial. You can't teach that.
Yeah.
Like you can't Google that at least.
Right.
And so problem solving, I'm not like college is not going to be the direction I'm pushing my kids in.
Sure.
Like MJ will have a business by the time he's 16. I'm sure of it. He's already talking about it. He's very money motivated. And like most kids are, but like he literally like he will calculate how much he has to do something. And like he will learn adversity.
Sure.
I learned more adversity from 30 to 36 than I did from 12 to 21.
And you're how old now?
37.
37.
But say like the last 6 or 7 years, I learned more in the adversity of me just putting myself into hard situations.
And how long have you and Tiff been married?
13 years.
Okay. Last 6 years of running a business now and homeschooling your kids. And you guys are together all the time, right? I mean, talk about how you got to, because you said right now you're in the healthiest place that you've been. How did you get there? Because if you go back 3 years ago to when parenting wasn't as exciting for you as it is now, you're probably in the trenches of startup. I don't know where you and Tiff are at this place in time. How did you so the people that are probably going to tune in are probably where you were. How'd you get here? And what was that like? When you talk about you and Tiff had struggles, like what were those?
So I would say we got married youngish. Like I had proposed to Tiff when she was a senior in college.
Okay.
And then we moved in together when she graduated.
Yeah.
So like we both kind of matured through a season together in that like early to mid 20s. So she's 3 years younger than me. Yeah, she's 3 years younger than me. And so like I was already I failed out of college freshman year. So like I bought a house when I was 19 and got a job. So like I just threw myself into it because like there were just certain things I just wasn't going to do.
Yeah.
And so when we first got together, like we went from both living independently. Like I had a townhouse that I owned in part of Virginia. She lived in a house by herself in college, and we moved into a 12 by 12 bedroom in her parents' 1,500 square foot house.
Wow.
And like that was the start of adversity, I'd say, in our marriage.
Is that just because of necessity?
Well, like I moved from Lynchburg to Charlotte. She moved from Tennessee to Charlotte. We were getting married in like 12 months. We're like, we don't know where we're going to live yet. We don't know the city. Let's just move in with your parents because they're there already. And like, we're like, we'll give it 12 months. I think it lasted 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And like, that was the start of us learning, maturing together. Like I'll never forget the day that like Tiff got all of her student loan notices in the mail. And like, cause she basically just like finance this, finance this, finance this, finance this, finance this, finance this. And like, it was like 15 little things that added up to like almost $3,000 a month in bills.
Yeah.
And like, she was making $60,000 a year at that point. And like, that started our struggle of learning how to budget, learning how to manage, learning how to game plan. And so if we go look at, we get through that, I built a pretty successful corporate career, and then I was miserable at the end. So I went from a really, really good individual contributor on an outside sales position to more of an account management position.
Okay.
So it went from like B2B to major accounts. And so like when I started at Verizon, I was in the retail world. I went to retail management. Then I went to B2B, and then I went to like enterprise sales. Enterprise sales for me was like my clients were like Volvo, US Airways. Like I had 8 like Fortune 100 companies, like Fortune 500 probably.
Yeah.
But that's a farming game. I was a hunter. I still am a hunter. I hate farming. And so
really quick for people who don't understand that.
Sure. So hunting
in our mastermind, we just talked about this yesterday.
Okay. So like hunting is going out and killing what you eat.
Yeah.
So it's like going and finding clients, getting through gatekeepers, selling to business. Like in the B2B world, it's like knocking doors.
You're the closer.
I'm going out to get in front of people.
Yeah.
I had zip codes and verticals, but I could go sell to anybody in those zip codes within that vertical. So I could just hunt endlessly.
Yeah.
Hunt is in go out and get.
Yep.
Farming is like I had 8 accounts. Those are the only people I could sell to. So you have to like nurture those accounts. You have to tend to them. You have to customer service them. You have to be available to them and then hope they buy at some point.
Yeah.
Not good for me. And that was the end of my Verizon career. and I got burnt out. And I don't know where Tiff's belief in me came from, to be honest. Where I was like, hey, I'm quitting my $150,000 a year job to go make 55 grand a year selling remodels. And so I think where the struggle happened between that and WinRate. So I worked for a remodeling company, I worked for a roofing company, I took massive pay cut. But that was the first time that we sat down and said, like, we want a life that we can be proud of. Not just like, because a really rude awakening for both of us was when we were both making over 100 grand a year and somehow still living paycheck to paycheck and miserable. And we were like, this is what we were supposed, like 100 grand is supposed to change our lives.
Which is what people even
forever.
think now.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know, make 6 figures and your life has changed.
Yeah.
And that's when we got really serious around like, okay, this still isn't enough. What is enough?
Yeah.
And that's where I would say the start of the struggle became, because when you get out of the mainstream way of doing things, you're going against the grain, you're going against the current. And where we started with it was really defining what does winning look like to us. It was like the freedoms, the things, the people, the lifestyle, like the cars, the house. Like it was like 2013, 2014. I still have like the notes we were taking on like, what do we want? Not knowing how to get there, not knowing what it was going to cost, not knowing how hard it was going to be. But Tiff and I mutually agreed that like divorce was not an option. Like it just was never, like it's a term that was just off the table for us.
Okay.
But we were also going to fight for it. We were willing to fight each other to evolve into these things that we wanted. And the maturity of that conversation, before we should have even known to have that conversation, I look back now going like, why did we know that? How did we know that? We didn't have influence like that. Like I didn't have any entrepreneurial influence growing up, you know, and what we learned through over those years was like, when you get clear on what you want, your ability to struggle through storms becomes easier because you know why you're doing it. When you don't know why you're doing it, it's too easy to pivot. And we had a very clear, like, this is what we want. And it kind of finalized its look. When she turned 30, I took her on a week-long vacation to Napa. And we were...
Had WinRate already been?
Yeah, so this is 2020.
Okay.
2020, 2021. Nope, it was 2019.
Okay.
It was spring 2019.
And pre-lockdown.
Pre-lockdown.
Yeah.
And so I had gone, WinRate started, I started full-time WinRate basically February 2019.
Okay.
I had started in 2018 when I was still working for the roofing company, but like that, I was like going all into myself. And there's a story there, which we can get to at some point. But so we're on this week-long vacation to Napa, pretty much credit card financing the whole thing. We probably spent 12 or 15 grand on that week.
Wow.
And because it was supposed to be like, you're 30, we did this. I have a company now. Like, we're doing it. This is supposed to be it. Okay, this is it. We're doing it.
Yeah, whatever it is.
And I'll never forget, we were sitting at the French Laundry, which is a 3-star Michelin restaurant.
Yeah.
It's like one of the best in the world. And we're like 11 courses into a 22-course meal. Miserable, uncomfortable, anxious, frustrated, disappointed that this wasn't it. And then we both like looked up at like, I think it was like some sort of like caviar mousse we were eating. We looked up and we're like, what the fuck are we doing? And we both had the realization like almost at the same time.
Yeah.
And because that was supposed to be it.
Yeah.
Like this was, you're 30, we're going to Napa, we love wine. Like this is supposed to be it. 7 days in Napa is too long. There's nothing to do in Napa than eat and drink wine. Like that's it. But like day 4, you're just in an anxious bloat. Like that's just where you're at that point. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, what are we doing? And we both agreed, like, we're doing what we think we're supposed to be doing, not what we actually want to be doing. Like across our life.
Yeah.
Because like we lived on a half acre on a 3,500 square foot house. We had 2 kids. Like we were good. Like practically brand new cars.
What were you measuring that against? What you saw?
I'd say what we saw, what like the TV, the movies, the vacations our parents wish they could have taken. You know, we were both making like 6 figures at that point. This is supposed to be it. And like we felt so uncomfortable. I'll never forget, we were sitting to this 2-person table at the French Laundry looking out going like, what are we doing here? Let's go get a burger. Like, and that was the first time that either one of us were acknowledging the fact that like what we wanted wasn't what we were chasing. And that was a hard realization. But then it was like, okay, what do we do? Because I'm all about action plans, right? Like for as long as I've been, I'm an action plan guy. So we sat there and we were sat at some bar, like some like fucking dive, and we were just like, we're over wine. Let's go get a vodka or a beer or something. I remember saying like, okay, what do we not love about our life right now? We made a list. And the list was like, she made a list, I made a list, and then we shared. And our list was like practically the same. And I was like, why didn't we talk about this sooner? And that was the start of building what we have now. So over the last 5 years has everything in my life changed in 2019.
Can you remember anything that was on the list?
So it was like, we were unhappy with the debt.
Yeah.
Tiff was very anxious about her student loans because like her student loans were more than our mortgage every month. Yeah. And we were 10 years in and she was like 5% down on principal. I'm like, and she hated what it was doing to like our financial situation. And she was embarrassed about it and all this. Like that was student loans was a big part of it. Like who we were spending time with was on both of our lists. Mm-hmm. The way we were spending money was on both of our lists. Mm-hmm. Our health and fitness was on both of our lists. Mm-hmm. We said it differently. I can't remember how we said it. We said it differently, but we both said like, we're not sure we're setting the best example for our children right now on like we're pretending to be happy. That's not real happiness. That's what sticks out to me at least. And then so we said, what are we going to do about it? And we had like huge equity in the house we had at the time, like probably like 150 grand in equity. And I was like, cool, let's sell the house and pay off your student loans. And she was like blown away. She's like, but you worked so hard to buy this house. I said, cool, but it's making us miserable. And that was the first time everybody in our life disagreed with us. That was the first time we went against the grain. That was the first time, because we had 2 kids. It was a beautiful corner lot. We had just built this beautiful backyard, fenced in, landscaping, covered porch, 3,500 square feet. Like it was a builder grade-ish house, but like it was nice. Yeah. And we're like, let's sell it. And I was like, why? Well, we were able to when we sold it, we were able to pay off so much debt. We bought a townhouse that we were able to live off Tiff's income. Mm-hmm. We're like, that sounds nice. Because then go all in on WinRate. And that was the start. 2019 was pivotal for a lot of reasons. That was the start of realizing how out of alignment we were with what we actually wanted. Like a lot of people don't know this part of 2019. Some people do, but most people don't. So the end of 2019, I attempted suicide. And I think I was so tired of not being me. And like I ended up having a double hernia, which is like a crazy story. Like God works in crazy ways. I'm gonna tell 3 parts of this story that I think the only explanation is God. So November 2019, I'm strong still. Like I was strong then. That morning of that day, I back squatted 315 for 5 sets of 5. Like I was feeling good, fluid. Mm-hmm. This was in 2019 when I thought I needed an office. So I was like commuting into downtown Charlotte for WinRate because like I thought I needed an office. And I had a meeting with a client that night in the office. And it was like a late in the afternoon, early evening meeting. And in front of him, like we weren't much farther away than this, I went and I like adjusted my body in the chair. I kind of like did one of these. Yeah. And if you're a man, you've done that, and like you sit down, your jeans tend to tighten up, and like sometimes you'll pinch a nut next to your leg, right? Sure. And you know that feeling like that. Oh, I got it. Well, I felt that, and then it got worse, and worse, and worse. And I'm like sweating in front of this dude. I didn't want to tell him. I didn't know what happened. Well, I got a double inguinal hernia, adjusting my body in a chair. And I'm like, I squatted this morning. Yeah. And so like if this happens, I get up, he leaves, I'm like crying. Like it was so much pain. And I'm like, what is going on? So I go to the bathroom and like there was a lot going on down there. And I'm like, I need to go to the emergency room. Like there's extra things where there shouldn't be, and there's like purpleness, and like I'm done. And so that was the start of like some of the worst pain I've ever been in.
I would imagine.
Like physical and emotional, because I just felt like such a loser. I'm like, I was just adjusting my body, and it's like, how fat am I? And I wasn't even fat at the time, but like, I like once you're fat, you're kind of always fat. Like there was a season when I was like 330 pounds. Like
Reference, like, what are you now?
like 255.
And you were what?
Oh, like 330.
Okay.
I was,
yeah,
like, so to put it in reference, I was a 47-inch waist.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
big.
Yeah. Big.
I'm like a 36-inch waist now.
Yeah.
So I was like, I just was so depressed and in so much pain. Like when you can't work out, like when you're used to being athletic, like you can't work out for any reason, you get kind of a little bit like down and then be in
Sure.
pain every day. Like every cough or sneeze, it was like I was re-injuring myself. So like I go to the emergency room and Tiff loves this story. So I think this is the perfect time to tell the story. So we go to the emergency room and they do some, and they're like, yeah, you have a double inguinal hernia, which means like you get hernias in your belly button, like your belly area, and then in your crotch area. Like this is like basically double hernia in the crotch area. And so like to relieve the pressure of this situation, they needed to like reinsert my intestines back into my body. Okay.
Okay.
And so the doctor basically like, all right, like, so I'm like laying down and she goes, all right, take a deep breath. And she basically just like tries to push them back in herself.
Were you numbed?
Nope.
Oh.
Nope. There's no numbing to this. It's
Okay.
and it doesn't work.
Literally like
it doesn't work the first time. And like the nurse, just, like the doctor, I think it was a doctor, a little blurry, but like I think it was a doctor. And she goes, like, so she like tries to push it back in with her fingers and like just blurts out, "Ooh, you're tight." I'm like, ma'am, I have never been fingered and told I was tight in my whole life. Okay, can I have a minute right now?
Yeah.
And she had like stand up and like basically I had to like every time I would cough or sneeze, I would re-injure myself. I'd like push it back in myself to like relieve the pressure. So anybody doesn't know what a hernia is, like basically your intestines pop through your pelvic floor.
Right.
And like for men, that goes into your sac.
Yep.
And like, so basically every time I cough or sneeze, they'd right back in. I'd have to push them back up and like to relieve the pressure. Because the pinch around the intestine is like where most of the pain comes from. It can really become quite uncomfortable. And so I ended up having surgery like 3 weeks later. Like, it was like 3 or 4 weeks of this. Like, you can't get me in sooner. Like, no, it's not, you're not dire. And then I think what ultimately dropped the floor out was the oxy they prescribed post-surgery. And so I was like 2 or 3 days in. So this is like, call it December 23rd, I think, 22nd or 23rd. And I remember sitting on the couch in the townhouse because I was embarrassed of the townhouse. We've talked about that. Like, I'm a successful businessman living in a townhouse with like old cars. It was very embarrassing for me, and for no reason. I'm not saying that was justified, but it still was like, so I'm sitting in my townhouse, like I can't work out. I'm in incredible pain. I feel like a loser. I realized I wasn't who I thought I was. I realized I wasn't really living for myself in 2019. I uncovered so much that I didn't want to look at.
Yeah.
And, you know, I blame it on the oxy, we'll say. But like there was a night I sat there for like 4 hours and I had this like picture this conversation between like military, confident, put together man and sniveling child. And I was both characters in my own head.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm done. I'm over this. I'm miserable. I want it to stop. And then like this other version of me, what I call the championship version of me, this like proud, confident, authoritative version of me was like, you're too strong to give up. That's like my book is called #TooStrong for that reason. Like that's where the too strong thing came from for me, was like 4 hours I had this battle in my head. And I ended up putting like the whole vial of oxy in my mouth and like glass in hand full of water, mouthful of pills. And the only thing I could think of is this might not be enough to do it. And I don't want to put more medical bills onto Tiff. And like, that's about as close to death as I've ever been. And so I spit him out, woke Tiff up, told her I tried to kill myself, and then like went on this journey to recover. But like where God kind of played a role in this, I don't know where it would have happened otherwise, but I believe I would have gotten there at some point because of how just depressed and anxious and out of myself I was. But we made the decision to sell the house in Napa on this vacation we shouldn't have been on. Come back, sell the house, move in the townhouse.
Yeah.
In that move, during that move, we lost the keys to the safe, and the keypad died. My gun was in that safe. I am 100% sure if I could have gotten into that safe that night, I wouldn't be here. Because a gun definitely would have done it.
Yeah.
And to go through this like realization that I'm underperforming, realization I wasn't living for myself, realization that I have a business that like I'm still not operating for me. I have like sons that I'm letting down. Like, who's this weak man like think he can be a father? Not enjoying being a father at that point, even like the shame and guilt of that, being in physical pain. But like the trip to the decision to selling the house to moving everything, like if that wouldn't have happened and I would have been in that same situation, like I would have absolutely gotten that gun and killed myself. And then I'm going to tell this story not to blame anybody. I think this was one of the greatest gifts God gave me. I went to 3 or 4 of the men in my life that were the closest with. Like the people that I had sacrificed for and been there for and hung out with and took care of. And I'm not blaming them because like, I believe this was the gift God gave me in this season. All of them in a roundabout way said the same thing. I don't know how to help you. Good luck. And to say that I felt alone and abandoned is like an understatement in that season. Like even my dad, I don't know what I would do right now if a friend of mine, I know what I would do now, but I don't know what I would have done then pre going through this, like what I would have done if someone came to me and said, hey, I tried to kill myself last night. I'm empty. I need you. That's got to be hard to hear.
Well, it's also hard to say.
But in that season, when I went to those 3 or 4 men, I was like, this happened last night. I'm empty. I need you. And they all, in their own way, said, I don't know how to help you. Good luck. I felt worthless. I felt not worth saving. Mm-hmm. And then this wasn't a quick like pivot fix. Like it's the only time it's happened. It hasn't happened since. It didn't happen before. But it was like probably 3 to 4 months after that I was still like struggling, like not throwing myself in front of a car, like walking down the road. And obviously, like I told my parents about the gun. They took the safe out of the house. Like we protected me from me to an extent, but like no one came to visit. Like no one called. I got a couple text messages from one of my friends, and that stopped. And what I realized in that season, so this would have been like, again, spring 2020, mm-hmm. was like, that was the first time I realized no one's coming to save me. And I had to start making decisions based on what's best for me, no matter what anybody thinks about it, because if I don't, I'm going to die. Yeah. If at any point I gave an inch to say, I'll do it because that's what they think I should be doing. Like I went to college like I was supposed to, failed out. So like my dad was like, you got to go to college, you're going to be a loser. And I fail out. I'm like, fuck, I'm a loser. I failed out freshman year. Like both my parents have like masters and doctorates. Both my brothers have masters. I couldn't make it through freshman year. Yeah. But that spring 2020 was no one's coming to save me and I'm too strong to give up. And like people ask me like, hey Mike, when did you break free from the opinion of others? Then that was when it happened. Because I had to, or I was going to die. And again, like it's got to be God. I have no explanation, because then April 2020, the fucking world shuts down. I lose 90% of my revenue literally overnight. Yeah, I mean, I went from doing 20, 25 grand a month in revenue, which was really good for me at that point, to like 2,500. Yeah. Overnight. Mm-hmm. And that's April. This is 3 months after I attempted to take my life. Tiff was so scared.
Did she know at the time that you were struggling with all this? Did you talk to her about it?
Not until I attempted. Like that night I woke her up and like we went through this journey together, but she didn't know how to help me other than just be there too. So like this pushed her into therapy. Yeah. She went to like, I'm going to figure out how to help you. And then in therapy realized she needed help. So like we both in that season in 2020, we went aggressively, I'm going to say selfish it's probably not the best word, it's probably the right word. We went aggressively selfish into working on ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like she couldn't carry my shit and I was clearly not in a position to carry hers. Yeah. And we both in 2020 went aggressively into working on ourselves. And that's where I think a lot of how we've worked through this is we've both been able to objectively say, I'm also part of the problem. I'm a big part of the solution, but we went into everything saying we are both responsible for this. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. Like we are fighting towards this together. And then like there was never a plan B. Like I remember sitting in my office. So Tiff in this season. So it's like Q2 2020 is probably the most scared Tiff has ever been, because she carried me through this 90 days leading up to that. I lost literally everything overnight. Like I was still spending $8-9 grand a month.
Sure.
Right, because I had employees, we had content, like there was overhead burn.
Yeah, you burned.
And I remember like Lindsay, who's my COO now, I said, I'm not firing you, like until we just have nothing left to do.
Yeah.
And she still talks about that. Like she doesn't know why I believed in it, but like I remember telling Tiff, there's no plan B. I'm going to sit here in this office. I sat at my computer for 10 hours a day for 4 months straight, just trying to help people for free. Like I probably did 1,000 free coaching calls in that, because no one knew. Am I essential? Am I not essential?
Right.
Can I operate? Can I not operate? And I had contractors, right, who were in-home service providers. Like every city and state was different on what they were allowing or not allowing. But Tiff was sure I wasn't going to survive that. Because why would she believe? Like the evidence would prove that, like, why would I? I mean, like I just crumbled. I had just given up pretty much. And I remember like we were in the townhouse, and from our bedroom to my office was probably 20 or 30 feet. And I wish I had pictures of them. I don't think I appreciate the value of them in the moment, but every foot down the hallway, Tiff had a Post-it note with a scripture on it. And then she had 10 on the door walking into my office. So every day when I had to walk from my bedroom to my office, because I had nothing else to do, I had one client. Yeah. I would have to walk past all this scripture to get there. And that was the only way she knew how to love me in that moment, because she didn't know how to help otherwise. I didn't appreciate what that meant in the moment. But looking back now, it's like, that was her fighting for me. That was me fighting for me. And I just showed up every day. And I remember April. It was, I need to crawl into a special project, or I'm going to crawl into a bottle and I'm going to die. Like those were my two options. So I did phase 1 of the 75 Hard program, and I wrote the first 9 chapters of my book in that month. And just kept showing up one little win at a time. Like win fast, win often as a tagline for the business sounds neat. In that season, it was like, I have to win the next decision or I'm going to die. Like I really felt that. Like I was still teetering. And that win fast, win often was aggressively there and just like setting myself up for winning. But then really what I learned in that season, I think Tiff and I have really benefited from over the last 6 or 7 years, is like I got really good at defining what a win looks like.
Yeah.
Like you as a human are so much more capable of winning in life than you realize, because we are 100% responsible for defining what winning looks like to us. Like hands down, factual. That's what that season taught me. For me to win fast and win often, I had to define. Winning was getting out of bed. Winning was doing my workout. Winning was not drinking. Winning was eating today.
Yeah.
And I was able to build a winning streak by simplifying and kind of systemizing and minimizing what it meant to win in that season. Like not dying was a win. Going on a walk and not throwing myself in front of a car was a win. And that's really where like the momentum started for us, and like breaking free from where we were, because we still didn't really know everything we wanted. We couldn't picture what we have now then. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people ask me like, well, Mike, how do I work towards this desired outcome or this winning if I can't see it yet? And my advice has always been the same, because this is what I did. Start moving away from who you don't want to be.
Sure. And
that will create light and freedom and ability for you to dream about who you do want to be. You know, so like I just started making decisions that were counter to what I didn't want. I didn't want to be fat. I didn't want to be alcoholic. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to commit suicide. I didn't want to be a bad husband. I didn't want to be like, so what would the alternative be? Mm-hmm. And that's how I just started getting these little wins over time, which turned into me and Tiff, like basically since 2000, we really kind of started the process in like 2016, but started taking it seriously in 2020, 2021, which was like goal setting and initiative creation as a family and quarterly meetings and starting to run our life like a business. And that's really what led to kind of where we are now, is like taking our life as or more serious than our business. I talk all the time, like what would happen to your relationship with your wife if you put as much thought into that as you do cash flow or payroll? or employees or customers or revenue or whatever. Like, and we started putting as much or more effort into our relationship and our family that we were putting into the business, because that's what I wanted.
What have you seen from that? I'm curious.
More defined desired outcomes, like what winning looks like, got a lot more clear. It was substantially more life experience than it is stuff or money.
Sure.
It's like, what does success in our life look like? It allowed us to be on the same page in decision making. Because I think a lot, like we did this for a long time. Like, Tiff, you manage the budget, I'll do these other things. You do the dishes, I'll do the laundry. It was a lot of like, you handle something completely on your own, and I'll handle something, and then we'll balance that. Right. And like, I think a lot of couples like, well, I did dishes last night. Why don't you, like, it comes to this like tick for tat.
Yeah.
We started making every decision as us. We are responsible for these things. We are responsible for our finances. We are responsible for making sure that date night happens. We are responsible for making sure the dishes. It became a lot of us. We are fighting for us, which allowed us to get. It no longer became tick for tat. No longer I did this. You pay that. I'll pay this. No, this isn't. It's we, as one, are doing this thing. And what it turned into, and what I would say an unexpected outcome of that is, because we were constantly talking about making decisions together, we learned a lot more about each other in that process, because we weren't afraid to say, I disagree, with a why. And so we learned, we were able to stay more in tune with how each of us were evolving differently to make sure that we were evolving together. Because we had more conversations. It was not you're the wife, I'm the husband, you do your job, I'll do mine, and we'll be successful. It was, we are going to attack this problem. And this problem is building the life we want. Everything the way we want. And the first way to do that is like, what do you want? What do I want?
Sure.
Most couples don't even have that conversation.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. So you consult founders, right? And that's your bread and butter. Do you ever find, because I know I do in my space, men struggling the way that you were struggling, the way that I've struggled, yet don't find the safety in being able to communicate that to their spouse and feel like they're riding solo? What would you say to them, having been through that experience?
So one of the biggest, I hear this, I didn't know this in the time, but I learned this by having this conversation with my clients. I think a lot of men feel like their wife can't handle the pressure that they carry. Like, the man's job is to provide and preside and protect, and like, that's my job. My wife can't handle the pressure of that. I think that's a very, very wrong perspective. I don't think I did that intentionally, but like, Tiff had, even early on, like, I was at Verizon, Tiff had her career, she went to work, I went to work, we came home and did life together. But like, the business side was separate. Because even when I first started WinRate, like, Tiff was on her career, so like, Tiff's job provided for us, which was another one of those, like, my wife makes more money than me and like, I'm a loser. But I think a lot, I felt it like, it's my job to provide to her. I don't think that's true. It's our job to provide the life we want for ourselves and our children. And we started putting ourselves first. But like, men who struggle with that now, I think, struggle with the, what is my role? What is her role? It's not tick for tat. I think the reason you think she can't handle what you're carrying is because you haven't given her all the details along the way to what got to that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's because you're just so burnt out on it, you don't want to have to catch her up to speed.
Yeah.
It's not that she can't handle it. It's just because she's going to have some fucking questions.
Yeah.
And you don't want to answer questions right now. And that's you being selfish and you being immature and ignorant to the fact that, like, you're not built to carry things alone. Because if you can't talk to your spouse about it, I guarantee you're not talking to God about it. I guarantee you're not talking to your employees about it. And so you're unnecessarily carrying all of life's pressures on your own that you weren't built to do alone.
Yeah.
Like, we're built to have community. We're built to have help. We're built to have people that understand us. And most of the time when you can't have that conversation, it just means you don't understand you.
Well, and I think a big problem, at least what I've seen, is that so many will create an idea front facing for people of where they are that is so over projected and over pronounced. And when you do that, kind of the fake it till you make it, and create this facade that everything is great, you create an insulated barrier from being able to get help because your ego and pride are so big. You'd have to backpedal everything, and you'd have to explain things, not only to a spouse, but maybe to a coach, to a company, to a board. And it's like, I would rather just sink this ship than have to own that I'm steering it in the completely wrong direction. I mean, you work with service-based businesses all the time. Like, you have to see that.
Well, and I think it becomes this. Tiff and I were actually talking about this, like, I think last week, because we're trying to find like our new friend group. We really haven't explored friends in Greenville.
Yeah.
And like, we're like, where are people like us hanging out? And then we're like, oh shit, they're not. They're just happy at home, living their lives with their families, and like not giving a shit what anybody else thinks about it. Like,
that's why I love Oklahoma, because I'm like, I'm just
so
just my
you
family.
ain't finding those people because they don't want to be found.
No.
And so like, I think part of with this,
peace is undervalued.
Peace is undervalued. Simplicity is undervalued.
It's way undervalued.
But I think that, like, men specifically struggle with this outward projection of like the TV movie version of husbands and fathers. Like, even look at CEOs, right? Like, there's not a movie or a show where the CEO is not some like overbearing, bravado, braggadocious, demeaning human.
Bro, like, all I can think of when I think of CEOs in movies is like 80s Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my age.
Yeah, but like, find me a movie that's a CEO that's like philanthropic and loving and a husband and a father and there at the base. You don't see that.
Right.
You see the dude in the limo with the suit behind the big desk in the big office yelling at people.
Mr. Big.
Yeah, and like that's what people think it looks like to be a leader.
Yeah.
And so if you're not that, you must be wrong. Because people don't see you every day doing your job.
Right.
People don't see me every day doing my job. And blending this harmony of life and business while still being wealthy, still making money, but also like, wealth and scoreboards are different for different people.
Well, and making money and being wealthy are two different things.
True.
I know a lot of guys with a lot of money in the bank that
miserable.
We have to convince to not put a gun in their mouth. And on the flip side of that, I know people who are paycheck to paycheck, and they are happy as clams, and they love their simple life here in rural Oklahoma. But even for me, like when I was making 30 grand a year as a pastor, like, I never went without anything. No. It wasn't actually until I got into...
You ate, you had clothes,
yeah,
you had
everything I needed. It wasn't until it was not until I got into the business space that I ever thought that I didn't have enough. It wasn't until I started hanging out in this entrepreneurial, larger than life circle that I ever thought, like, I'm not already blessed.
But I think to the question around like the Tiff and I, when I started opening up about Tiff vulnerably, she was able to open up. Because men are not the only ones that carry the ego of the role they're supposed to play.
Yeah.
Tiff doesn't want to be a stay-at-home mom. Tiff wants to be productive. Tiff wants to have a career. Like, Tiff has a dark background and a dark history too. And until I showed her that I can open up to her and her not leave me, as the leader, that's your job. Like, you're the tip of the spear. Like, it's your job to solve hard problems the hard way, so that everybody else can solve it the easy way. You got to face this stuff head on. So when I started being open with Tiff about like even just this past week, like, I have a long history of struggle with porn.
Okay.
And the last 2 or 3 years, I haven't watched it. Like, even on my phone, I have like the screen,
Watchdog and stuff.
No, even just on the iPhone, like, you can go in and block content through the screen time and like content restrictions.
Cool.
But I'm not afraid to tell Tiff, like, hey, Tiff, I've been feeling a little lonely lately and I'm feeling drawn back to porn. I just want to tell you because I'm feeling it. The freedom to have that conversation with your spouse when you're dealing with it, so you can get it out and say it out loud and get it out in the open, steals all the power from it.
Yeah.
And I think so many people hide so much of their past. And like, Tiff's been pretty open about like the things that she's done in her life that she's not proud about, that she was like, I never thought I'd be able to tell anybody this. And like, it started with, hey, I tried to kill myself last night. What do you want? What do I want? We have to find a way to work. And like, being like, peeling back the layers of ego and peeling back the layers of should have and I'm supposed to's and what ifs. It's like the really grassroots of like, what do I want? Tiff, what do you want? And like, being willing to be imperfect together has led to like where we are now, where like we are very open about like things that most people I don't think can be open about. And when you carry that, it's a seed.
Sure.
And the more that you deal with it alone, you water that seed. And some people are carrying forests of bullshit inside of their heads and their hearts right now because they were afraid to just say, hey, I'm struggling with this right now. Hey, I'm scared right now. And even realizing that like all negative emotion or reaction, maybe all is an exaggeration, but like most negative emotion and reactive things, when you look back, like I wasn't proud of how I handled that, stems from fear.
Sure.
Right. Most people don't think about that.
Yeah.
And so now Tiff and I, when we have a blow up about something, we have gotten good at coming back and saying, this is what I was actually afraid about. Like how I projected on you right just then, or like an hour ago or a week ago or a day ago, whatever. You weren't the problem. Here's what I'm actually afraid of.
Do you ever ask each other in the moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or it'll be like, we'll both, hey.
Like if you're blowing up and she's like, hey, what are you afraid of right now?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll say, you know what? I don't actually know. Let me go think about it. I'll come back to you. Like,
yeah.
And so that has also been powerful in us like being able to proactively then communicate the fear as opposed to irrationally reacting to a situation and blowing up at my kids because they're kids, you know, and it's like because I was scared of something.
Yeah.
And like those little conversations we've had over a decade now of we spent so much time afraid to say the truth out of fear of like Tiff and I both carry a very similar fear, which I think most people do. Like we have a giant fear of ending up alone. I think most people have that fear. They just don't accept it, acknowledge it, or know it. And so like, well, if I tell you something about me that like you don't like, you might not love me anymore and then I end up alone. Or if I can't provide for my children, maybe they won't want to be around me. Or that's, at least for me, a lot of the pressure and fear. But I think like over the last 6 or 7 years, as we've done our quarterly planning, our yearly planning, continually reevaluating what we want and what we don't want and why, we've been able to grow together. And we're still not perfect. Like we still get in fights. I still am immature sometimes. Like she's still, you know, we still have problems. But I'll say dropping certain expectations we had of ourselves has allowed us to experience higher highs and lower lows. Because like when you stay, well, I'm supposed to be like this, you stay in a much more, we'll say like a shorter threshold. Like you're not supposed to feel that way. So I don't allow myself to emote it, right? Or have it or deal with it. You know, all the way back to like, you know, sports when I was a kid and how I'm supposed to show up and then I got fat. And I was like, what is that supposed to look like? Like I think it was like a Christmas one year, my mom got me a scale. I was like, thanks.
Wow.
Because and like my entire life, my mom has like not like to them, but like she makes fun of fat people. And so the minute I became fat, like I just couldn't deal with it. It was really hard because like my mom wasn't afraid to tell me. And that like emotion of like not being enough, Tiff and I have found a way to communicate past that. We're like, we're going to fight sometimes, but we are fighting for a unified desired outcome. And she holds me accountable just as much as I hold her accountable. Like something simple for me is like, I don't care what Tiff looks like. Tiff cares what Tiff looks like. And when Tiff doesn't have how Tiff looks, Tiff assumes I don't think Tiff looks good. And when Tiff doesn't think I think Tiff looks good, Tiff doesn't want to have sex with me. And so like I'm like, hey babe, like let's lay off the mac and cheese, let's go do some cardio. It's not because I think you're fat, it's because you're gonna think you're fat. And when you think you're fat, it fucks with our relationship. So I'm holding you accountable to a standard you said you needed for our relationship to be where we want it to be. And like it forced Tiff to really evaluate why is she working out. So she pivoted probably 2-3 years ago from I work out because I hate myself. I hate the way I look, I hate the way I feel to I work out because I love myself and I deserve to feel healthy. Like that mindset shift changed everything for her.
Yeah.
Of like why she's doing it. So I say, hey babe, it's time to work out. They're like, you tell your wife she's fat? No. No. I tell my wife that like she's getting to a point where she's going to be unhappy with herself. And when she's unhappy with herself, it completely destroys the intimacy in our relationship.
Yeah.
And so like that accountability has come from years of like, why do you feel this way? What are you afraid of? What do you want? And we have that conversation monthly, at least quarterly, Like we do an overnight date night every quarter where we just like talk about like where are we winning, where are we losing, and what we're going to do about it. And that ability to be open in those conversations. Like this is where you are failing me right now. And vice versa. Oh, cool. Thanks for pointing that out. It's not like it doesn't turn into this tick for tat. Oh yeah, this is where you're failing me right now. Like those, you hear those conversations all the time. That's not how we operate. I'm telling you what I'm seeing so that we can evolve together. And she's turned into an incredible leader because of it.
Yeah.
You know, and our marriage is, yeah, the strongest it's ever been. Our relationship with our kids is the strongest it's ever been. And again, I still yell at my kids sometimes. Like I'm not perfect, but I'm not sure not yelling at my kids is perfect. Like I think a little bit of fear in an 8-year-old son is probably a pretty good thing. You know, a little bit of like authority and a little bit of respect and a little bit of not wanting to let me down. I think there's some power in that as well if utilized correctly. But for Tiff and I over the last 6 or 7 years, I think it's a constant line of communication around who are we, what do we want, who do we want to be, what matters to us in this season. You even selling the car last year. Like I bought like the Hellcat a couple of years ago. Like that was like my dream car, and I souped it up. I mean, it was like 1,100 horsepower. It was like stupid.
Damn.
And like last year, I was like, it doesn't matter to me anymore. Like we have other goals. Let's just sell it. And it was completely just like selling the house in 2019. It became unemotional when that decision was in alignment with our mission. And like I'm not emotionally attached to anything but accomplishing the desired outcome. And like last year was a debt reduction year. We paid off like $300,000 in debt. Part of that was being smart with our income. Part was being smart with our debt. Part was being smart with some assets we had and getting rid of them. And like, cool, I don't have the car anymore. Okay, I didn't need 5 cars.
Sure.
I needed to pay down debt this year.
Yeah.
And because when her and I are on the same page, we're a dangerous combination because we're going to get it done. And that's the reputation we've built. Like people know if Mike says something, you can count on it happening.
Yeah.
Like that's a reputation I've built because once the mission becomes clear, there is no plan B. That is it. That's what we're doing.